My name is Lucas Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and my family thinks I dispatch freight at night for barely enough to cover rent. They don't know I own Crestline Distribution Group, a $2.7 billion logistics empire. I kept it private because every achievement I ever had became my brother's spotlight or my parents' property. On Christmas Eve, they invited me to celebrate his new CEO job and his $324,000 salary, but the invitation told me to arrive early. I knew dinner wasn't the only plan. I wore an old coat, carried a work bag, and drove my 10-year-old car because I wanted to see how they treated the man they believed was broke. The moment I walked through the door, my mother inspected my coat, warned me not to embarrass the guests, then covered a stack of job applications with a napkin. "We'll discuss your future after dinner," she said. 10 minutes later, every seat was occupied and the celebration began as though I'd been invited only to provide contrast. My older brother Brandon sat beneath a gold banner that read, "Congratulations, CEO." He wore a new watch and explained that Meridian Medical Supply had appointed him Chief Executive Officer at $324,000 a year. My mother repeated the number. My father raised his glass and said the family finally had a leader with the discipline to carry our name forward. Brandon passed his phone around to show the leased SUV and a listing for a house in Wayzata. When the phone reached me, he said, "Don't worry, Lucas. We're going to help you become presentable too." His wife Allison sat beside him in a cream suit, accepting every compliment as though she'd negotiated the appointment herself. She was Meridian's CFO, and my parents treated their marriage as proof Brandon had chosen correctly in every area of life. "A CEO and a CFO at the same table," my mother said. "That's what ambition looks like." Then she asked whether my terminal still gave employees discounts on vending machine food. My Aunt Kelly wanted to know my hourly rate. Her husband Todd asked whether freight dispatching required training or whether people simply answered phones until a truck arrived. I said the work required judgment, timing, and knowledge of routes. Todd laughed and called that a careful description of using a headset. They didn't wait for complete answers. Each question supported a case they'd already built. I could have told them my decisions affected freight moving through 22 states, that hospitals depended on our refrigerated network, and that more than 14,000 employees received paychecks from the company I founded. Instead, I asked Brandon what Meridian planned next. He announced that Crestline Distribution Group had invited Meridian to a final presentation on December 26. He claimed Crestline approached him because his reputation had reached the board. I knew the truth. Meridian had requested the meeting 5 times. Crestline agreed only because hospital clients wanted a secondary supplier. Brandon had been given one controlled opportunity to prove his company was stable. Allison's fingers tightened around her fork when he said Crestline's name. My father said Crestline's anonymous founder was the kind of person young executives should study. Disciplined, ethical, self-made. My mother said the founder never gave interviews because serious people didn't need attention. Brandon nodded and explained how his leadership had probably impressed someone at Crestline. When dinner paused and I carried dishes toward the kitchen, I heard my mother speaking with Kelly near the pantry. She said each person had been assigned a subject for the conversation after dessert: employment, housing, retirement, relationships, and personal responsibility. Kelly asked whether Brandon's solution was ready. My mother answered, "The assistant contract is printed. Lucas will sign tonight, and then he can finally learn how a real company operates." After the plates were cleared, my mother moved everyone into the living room. The chairs were arranged in a semicircle, facing the couch. The discussion had been planned before my invitation was mailed. She placed me in the center. My father opened a financial planning folder, a sample budget, a debt worksheet, and a page titled Adult Accountability Agreement. He'd estimated my income, rent, groceries, and transportation without asking for a single bank statement. The numbers were wrong, but his certainty was more revealing than the errors. Kelly slid another packet onto the coffee table: apartment listings, resume templates, and applications for office coordinator positions. Several forms already had my name typed across the top. Todd said I should sell my car before it became a burden and offered to list it online. Nobody asked whether the car was reliable, whether I liked my apartment, or whether I already invested. They weren't collecting information. They were assigning a life. Brandon placed a black folder in front of me. Inside was an employment contract from Meridian. My name, start date, and salary were entered. I would resign from the freight terminal and become Brandon's assistant for $42,000 a year. My duties included managing his calendar, arranging travel, coordinating family events, and completing additional tasks at the CEO's discretion. "This is your way out," he said. "You'll finally see how a serious company operates." I asked whether he'd considered what I wanted. My father answered, "Your choices have not earned this family's confidence. When someone offers structure, gratitude is appropriate." Brandon said he needed the contract signed before the Crestline meeting because arriving with a new assistant would make his executive office look established. I set down the pen and said I'd review the offer for one day. His face hardened. People without options should not negotiate as though they have leverage. Then Allison cleared her throat and announced she was pregnant. My mother cried. My father embraced Brandon. Within minutes, my mother returned to the contract and said I could move into their guest room, help after the baby arrived, and save money while the family monitored my spending. The assistant position would make me subordinate to Brandon at work and unpaid help at home. I lifted the contract and saw another document beneath it. The heading contained my late grandfather's name and the words, "Bennett Family Trust." Before I could read further, my mother pulled it away. "That is unrelated." I asked why a trust document had been placed with my employment contract. My father told me not to create distractions. Allison's phone rang. She left the room and closed the hallway door. When I went to retrieve my coat, I heard her say, "Change the inventory reserve. The lender cannot see the original warehouse valuation, and those numbers must be corrected before Crestline reviews them." The call ended. The door opened and Allison found me standing close enough to have heard everything. A few minutes later, she followed me onto the back porch and closed the door behind us. She asked how much of the call I'd heard. I said enough to recognize that she was changing financial information before a due diligence review. Her smile returned, but it had become careful. "You work in dispatch," she said. "Inventory reserves and collateral valuations are more complicated than they sound." I asked why complexity required hiding an original warehouse value from a lender. For the first time that evening, she stopped speaking to me like a child. She offered to help me find a better position at Meridian if I remained supportive of Brandon and didn't create trouble before the Crestline meeting. I asked whether the better position also included changing diapers. Her jaw tightened. "Do not make problems for your brother because you are embarrassed about your own life." I didn't threaten her or reveal anything. I answered, "Then your records should explain themselves." When I returned, my grandmother Marjorie stood near the hallway with her coat buttoned. She asked me to help find a box in the garage. My mother barely looked up because she assumed my grandmother needed someone to carry it. In the garage, Marjorie opened her purse and placed a brass key in my palm. It belonged to a safe deposit box at a bank near downtown St. Paul. "Your grandfather left something for you," she said. She said she'd spent years hoping my parents would correct what they'd done without forcing the family into court. My grandfather had left me a minority interest in a commercial parcel beside the old St. Paul rail terminal. At the time, it was neglected property, storage buildings and cracked pavement. After logistics companies expanded through the district, the land became valuable. My parents later claimed I'd signed a disclaimer, transferring my interest to a Bennett family holding company. She'd seen the signature and never believed it was mine. The company had pledged the parcel as collateral for a Meridian expansion loan that helped Brandon's division grow and strengthened his path to the CEO position. "Your father said you agreed because Brandon had a future and you did not," Marjorie said. My parents had converted that judgment into a financial decision and used my inheritance to support the child they considered worthy. She said the box contained trust records and correspondence from my grandfather's attorney. I didn't tell her that Crestline already owned most of the surrounding terminal property, or that the disputed parcel sat inside a redevelopment plan our board had delayed because of unclear title records. When I left, my mother called after me that the assistant offer would expire the next day. I drove to the modest apartment I kept for private visits and opened a secure laptop. A message waited in Crestline's whistleblower portal from Megan Fletcher, Meridian's internal audit manager. She reported inflated warehouse assets, duplicate vendor payments, inventory recorded at locations where it didn't exist, and pressure from Allison to alter reports. She'd preserved emails, board materials, and revision histories. Her message also stated that Brandon had received at least one warning and told her to postpone the issue until after his CEO appointment. I called Rachel Sloan, Crestline's chief operating officer, and summarized what I'd heard and what Megan had documented. Rachel asked whether I wanted to cancel Meridian's presentation. No, I said. Let them make every representation on the record. On Christmas morning, I used Marjorie's key to open the safe deposit box. Inside were the original trust, a copy of the alleged disclaimer, and letters between my father and a family attorney. The disclaimer had been notarized on a date when I was attending college in Oregon, more than 1,500 miles away. One letter warned that the signature might not survive examination. Another, written by my father, said the transfer should remain unquestioned because Meridian needed the collateral. The final sentence was underlined twice. Meridian's lender must never learn that Lucas Bennett still holds a legal claim to the property. I photographed every page and sent encrypted copies to Rachel and Crestline's outside counsel. By sunrise on December 26, the roads were clear. I dressed in a navy suit, fastened my tie, and placed the same old coat over everything before leaving. At 8:30, the Bennett family entered Crestline's lobby together. Brandon wore a dark overcoat and carried a leather presentation case. He found me waiting near reception in my old coat and looked relieved. "Good, you made it," he said. He handed me the leather case. "Carry this upstairs and stay close in case I need something." I took it because I wanted the moment documented exactly as it happened. Allison leaned toward me. "Do not speak during the meeting unless someone asks you a direct question. This is not the place to prove you understand business." The receptionist, who knew me well, looked from the family to me and asked, "Is the executive level ready for you, Mr. Bennett?" I answered, "I'll join them shortly." Brandon interpreted the exchange as routine courtesy. In the conference room, Brandon introduced himself as Meridian's new CEO and described the company as financially stable, operationally disciplined, and ready for a long-term partnership. He said current inventory levels could support Crestline's hospital network without interruption. He stated that Meridian's collateral was unchallenged, its warehouse valuations were conservative, and its internal controls had been independently tested. Allison confirmed the numbers were complete and accurate. Rachel asked whether any lender, auditor, or internal employee had raised unresolved concerns about inventory or vendor payments. Allison said no. Brandon added that he'd personally corrected management weaknesses inherited from the prior administration. My father asked permission to speak as a representative of the Bennett family holding company and described the St. Paul parcel as properly transferred, fully controlled, and free from competing claims. When the presentation ended, Rachel asked, "Have Meridian and its representatives now completed all material statements concerning inventory, controls, collateral, and executive knowledge?" Rachel turned toward me. "Mr. Bennett, would you take your seat at the head of the table?" I crossed the room and placed Brandon's presentation case beside the chair. He stepped in front of me and gave a strained laugh. "Lucas, she means someone from Crestline. Sit back down." Security remained near the door without moving, because every officer in the building recognized me. Rachel touched the control panel. The main screen changed to Crestline Distribution Group, Office of the Founder. Beneath it appeared my name and title, Lucas Bennett, founder and majority owner. No one spoke until I sat down and placed Brandon's unsigned assistant contract beside his presentation. His hand lowered slowly. My mother stared at the screen, then at my coat, as if one of them had to be false. I opened the contract to the page showing my salary and duties. 40 hours ago, I said, this family tried to hire Crestline's founder as Brandon's executive assistant for $42,000 a year. My mother found her voice first. She said the intervention had been motivated by love and that they could only act on the information I'd given them. I asked one question. Would any of this have been acceptable if I truly were a struggling dispatcher? Nobody answered. Then let's discuss Meridian, I said. Rachel displayed a comparison of the financial files submitted across the previous 6 weeks. Megan appeared by secure video and identified herself as Meridian's internal audit manager. She explained that several inventory entries represented products that didn't exist at the listed warehouses. Vendor contracts had been revised after approval, and duplicate payments had been routed through a consulting company owned by Allison's cousin. One message from Allison instructed accounting staff to maintain the higher inventory figure until after Crestline signed. Megan then showed the warning she'd sent to Brandon, describing unsupported inventory, related party payments, and the risk that Meridian's collateral included property the company might not legally control. Brandon admitted he'd seen the message, but said Allison assured him the issues were technical. A board packet appeared on the screen, showing Brandon had ordered Megan's report removed from a meeting 2 days before his CEO appointment. I told him he might not have designed the scheme, but he knowingly prevented scrutiny because scrutiny threatened the title he wanted. I removed the original trust from a sealed evidence envelope and placed it before outside counsel. The next screen showed the disputed disclaimer, the notarization date, my college records from Oregon, and my father's correspondence with the family attorney. The lender's representative asked whether my father had written that Meridian must never learn I retained a legal claim. He said the words had been taken out of context. Marjorie, who joined remotely, confirmed that my grandfather intended the interest for me, and that she never believed I signed it away. My mother began crying. She said they believed Brandon needed the land more because he had ambition, a family, and a corporate future. "Lucas, you were drifting," she said. "We thought the property would be wasted." I asked whether theft became responsible planning when parents preferred one child. The lender's representative stated that its legal and fraud teams would immediately review the collateral documents. Rachel announced that Crestline rejected the proposed partnership. On one of the remote screens, Meridian's independent directors called an emergency session. They placed Brandon on administrative leave and removed Allison's access to financial systems. Then Rachel opened a new encrypted file from Megan. The screen displayed an unreleased email Allison had written to her cousin. It said that once Crestline signed, she would blame all irregularities on Brandon, resign immediately, and leave him holding the certifications. Brandon looked at Allison and asked why she had told him the report was routine. She said he had wanted the appointment and had made his own decision. The consequences began before the family reached the parking lot. Meridian's board terminated Allison for cause and filed a civil claim seeking recovery of unauthorized payments. Investigators began reviewing whether altered records or false collateral documents had been transmitted to financial institutions. 3 weeks later, Meridian removed Brandon as CEO after concluding he had suppressed internal warnings, misrepresented due diligence, and failed to supervise the CFO. They withdrew his compensation package, performance award, and leased vehicle. He and Allison separated. I filed a civil case concerning the land transfer. A document examiner concluded that the signature on the disclaimer was not mine. Faced with the trust, travel records, attorney correspondence, and handwriting analysis, my parents agreed to restore the title, reimburse my legal expenses, and surrender all claims. Their bank and professional contacts learned about the disputed collateral through required legal notices. 2 months after his removal, Brandon came to Crestline without an appointment. He looked thinner and arrived without the watch. He said the family was finally ready to acknowledge everything I'd achieved. Then he asked me to invest in Meridian, protect his remaining shares, and help him maintain the Wayzata house. I told him they didn't miss me. They missed the version of me they could control. Learning that I was wealthy didn't erase what they chose to do when they believed I had nothing. "You are asking me to restore your lifestyle," I said, "not your conscience." He argued that I had tested the family by hiding my identity. I told him respect that survives only after evaluation is not respect. I gave him a letter from counsel requiring all future communication to go through attorneys. He left without another argument. My mother later mailed a box of family photographs and asked for another Christmas. I returned it unopened. Marjorie remained the only relative I kept in contact with because she had provided evidence without demanding forgiveness as payment. After the title was restored, I transferred the recovered land into a workforce development foundation. We built paid training programs in logistics, refrigeration maintenance, freight dispatching, warehouse technology, and supply chain safety. I chose that purpose because my family had mocked the working people whose knowledge helped me build Crestline. Cutting contact was not an impulsive act of revenge. It was the final boundary after years of emotional and financial exploitation. My family believed money was the reason they should respect me. They were wrong. The moment that mattered was not when they learned what I owned. It was when I understood that I did not owe access to people who valued me only after discovering my price. Their apologies arrived after their power disappeared, and I was no longer willing to confuse regret with change. I did not leave them because I had become powerful. I left because I had finally stopped giving my power away. Thank you for listening and watching until the final seconds. All situations in this story are fictional and made only for entertainment and reflection. We hope it reminds you that people who hurt you might expect you to stay available, forgiving, and easy to reach. But once you understand your worth, access to your life becomes something that must be earned with respect.